At 35,000 feet above the dark, endless Atlantic, Flight 918 was just another red dot moving smoothly across a glowing radar screen. Inside the cabin, passengers slept, watched movies, or stared out at the quiet night sky. The hum of the engines was steady, comforting, almost hypnotic. For the cockpit crew, it was a routine crossing, the kind pilots trusted most because nothing unusual ever seemed to happen when everything felt this normal. Then, without warning, the left engine shuddered. A sharp vibration ran through the aircraft like a sudden heartbeat out of rhythm. The captain's hand snapped to the controls as warning lights blinked amber, then red. "Engine fluctuation," the first officer said, already scanning the instruments. Before the captain could respond, the radios crackled, once, twice, and then went completely silent. No ATC, no background hiss, nothing. The cockpit felt unnaturally quiet. "Check primary comms," the captain ordered. The first officer tried every frequency: emergency channel, backup radio, satellite link. Dead. At the same moment, the autopilot disengaged with a harsh electronic tone. The aircraft dipped slightly, enough for passengers to feel it in their stomachs. In the cabin, heads lifted, seatbelts clicked tighter. A baby began to cry. "Maintain altitude manually," the captain said, forcing his voice to stay calm. He'd trained for emergencies, but something about this felt wrong. Too sudden, too complete. Then the second engine coughed. Not a full failure, but close enough to make the warning alarm scream. "Captain," the first officer whispered, eyes wide, "we're losing systems." They were flying blind. No radio contact, partial engine power, over open ocean. In air traffic control centers across the region, Flight 918 vanished from active communication. Controllers tried calling. Again and again. Nothing. One supervisor leaned forward, frowning. "We've lost voice contact with a commercial aircraft at 35,000 feet. "Scramble relay attempts," another controller said. "Military frequencies too." Across the Atlantic, in a restricted airspace not shown on civilian maps, alarms quietly activated. 2 Black Hawk helicopters sat on standby, rotors already warm from routine drills. Pilots looked up as classified screens flashed red. "Unidentified commercial aircraft. Loss of comms. Possible system failure." "Launch," came the order. Within minutes, the Black Hawks lifted into the night, cutting through clouds as they accelerated toward the coordinates. Back aboard Flight 918, the situation worsened. The cabin lights flickered. Oxygen masks did not deploy, but the pressure indicators began to drift. Passengers sensed it now. Panic rippled through rows like electricity. A flight attendant tried to smile as she walked the aisle, but her hands trembled. In the cockpit, "Mayday," he said instinctively, pressing the transmit button again. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Flight 9, wait." The captain wiped sweat from his forehead. Only static answered. Then through the noise, something changed. A voice cut through the dead air. "Clear, calm female. Flight 918, do not descend." Both pilots froze. The first officer stared at the radio. "Did you hear that?" Before the captain could answer, the voice spoke again. "I repeat, maintain 350, adjust heading 5 degrees west, acknowledge." The captain pressed the transmit switch, his heart pounding. "Unknown caller, identify yourself." A brief pause. Then, "Call sign Phoenix, I have visual and radar contact, you are not alone." The cockpit went silent again, but this time, not because of failure. Because neither pilot knew what to say. "Phoenix." That wasn't a civilian call sign, and no air traffic controller sounded like that. Young, steady, almost impossibly composed. "Phoenix," the captain said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "We have partial engine failure and no contact with ATC. Who are you?" Another pause, shorter this time. "You have asymmetric thrust and degraded avionics," Phoenix replied. "I am routing support to you. Follow my instructions exactly." The first officer mouthed, "How does she know that?" Before the captain could question her further, Phoenix continued. "Reduce throttle on engine 2 by 8%, compensate with rudder, hold altitude." The captain hesitated, then did it. The aircraft steadied. Not perfectly, but enough. In the distance, far below the jet's altitude, 2 dark shapes raced through the clouds. Black Hawks. Inside one cockpit, a military pilot spoke into his headset. "Phoenix, we have visual on the target." "Copy," Phoenix replied instantly. "Maintain formation below. Do not approach until I authorize." On Flight 918, the captain finally exhaled. "You're military," he said. "Yes," Phoenix answered. "Focus on flying." Minutes passed like hours. Passengers clutched armrests as the plane vibrated, but it no longer felt like it was falling. Flight attendants whispered reassurances they barely believed themselves. In the cockpit, Phoenix's voice was constant. "Fuel balance check. Correct your pitch." "Good, hold that." She never raised her voice, never hesitated. It was as if she could see everything. "What's your position?" the first officer asked. "Classified," Phoenix replied gently, "but help is close." Then through the cockpit windows, the captain saw movement, dark silhouettes against the moonlit clouds. "Helicopters, military helicopters." "Captain," the first officer breathed, "are those Black Hawks?" "Yes," Phoenix said, "they are yours now." For the first time since the silence began, hope entered the cockpit. But Phoenix wasn't finished. "Flight 918, she said, her tone sharpening. "Slightly. This is where it gets difficult. Your aircraft will not make a civilian airport. You will follow me to an alternate landing zone." The captain swallowed. "Where?" Another brief pause. "A place you are not authorized to know," Phoenix answered. "But it will save every soul on board." The captain looked at the first officer. Then he nodded, even though Phoenix couldn't see it. "Phoenix," he said firmly, "you have control." High above the ocean, surrounded by darkness, Flight 918 followed the voice of a girl no one had ever heard of. A call sign whispered only in emergencies as the Black Hawks closed in and the sky held its breath. The Black Hawks moved into position like silent guardians, their dark shapes cutting through the clouds beneath Flight 918. From the cockpit, the captain could see their navigation lights blinking steadily, proof that whatever had taken control of this night was real. "Flight 918, Phoenix said, her voice calm but firm. "Begin a controlled descent, 2,000 feet per minute. Follow the lead helicopter's heading." The captain adjusted the controls. The aircraft responded sluggishly, as if exhausted, but it obeyed. Passengers felt the descent and panic surged again. Some prayed, some cried quietly, others held hands with strangers. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, voices shaking but determined, repeating the same words again and again. "You are safe, please remain seated." In the cockpit, sweat soaked the captain's collar. "Phoenix," he said, "we're approaching minimum fuel." "I know," she replied without hesitation. "That's why we can't waste a second." Below them, the Black Hawks banked east. One climbed slightly, positioning itself within visible range of the jet's nose. "You're going to follow their lights," Phoenix continued. "Ignore everything else." The first officer glanced at the navigation screen. "Captain, this airspace isn't on any chart." The captain nodded slowly. "I know." Phoenix heard the doubt in his silence. "Captain," she said more softly now, "I wouldn't be speaking to you if there were another option." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the captain answered, "Understood." The descent continued through thick clouds. Turbulence shook the aircraft violently, tossing it like a toy. A scream echoed from the cabin, followed by the sound of something crashing to the floor. "Hold her steady!" the first officer shouted over the alarms. "I'm trying," the captain replied through clenched teeth. "Reduce descent rate," Phoenix ordered. "Now!" The captain obeyed. The shaking eased. "That's it," Phoenix said. "You're doing well." The words hit harder than she could have known. In a cockpit full of alarms and uncertainty, reassurance felt like oxygen. Suddenly the clouds parted. Below them lay something impossible. A runway, long, narrow, glowing faintly in the darkness, hidden between mountains and ocean, absent from any civilian map. The first officer stared. "Where is that?" "A classified emergency landing facility," Phoenix replied. "Built for nights like this." The Black Hawks peeled away, taking positions on either side of the runway. Powerful lights illuminated the tarmac. "Flight 918, Phoenix said, her voice steady but intense. "This will be a manual landing, no second attempt." The captain's grip tightened. "I'll talk you through every second," she continued. "Trust the voice." The aircraft lined up with the runway. Wind shear hit them hard, shoving the nose sideways. "Correct left," Phoenix commanded instantly. The captain reacted. "Good, power back, flare, now!" The runway rushed toward them. Passengers braced instinctively. The wheels slammed down hard but straight. A deafening roar filled the cabin as brakes screamed in protest. Smoke rose from the landing gear. Hold it," Phoenix whispered. The aircraft slowed. 30 knots. 20.
10.
Finally, stillness. For one long heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Phoenix exhaled. "Welcome back to Earth, Flight 918. The cockpit erupted in relieved laughter and tears. The first officer covered his face with both hands. In the cabin, applause broke out. People cried openly now, hugging strangers, whispering thanks to a voice they would never see. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft as soldiers approached cautiously. The engines finally died, leaving behind a silence very different from the one that had started it all. The cabin door opened. Passengers expected commanders, medics, officials. Instead, a young woman stepped forward. She wore a flight suit marked only with a small phoenix emblem. Her helmet was tucked under one arm. She couldn't have been more than 20. The captain stared at her in disbelief as he descended the stairs. "You're Phoenix?" he asked. She nodded. "Ma'am," he said, then stopped, unsure what title even applied. "You saved my aircraft." She shook her head gently. "You flew it." Behind them, soldiers stood at attention. Passengers watched from the windows, whispering, "That's her. She sounds so young." "She saved us." Phoenix looked up at the plane, at the rows of faces pressed to the glass. "I was trained for silent airspace recovery," she said quietly, almost to herself. "This was my first real-world call." The captain blinked. "First?" "Yes, sir." He laughed softly, shaking his head in awe. Medical teams boarded the aircraft, checking passengers one by one. No serious injuries, no lives lost. By dawn, Flight 918's passengers were transported quietly to a nearby civilian airport. No cameras, no reporters, no headlines. Officially, the incident was labeled temporary communication failure with military assistance. Unofficially, pilots would talk. About the night radios went dead at 35,000 feet. About the Black Hawks that appeared out of nowhere, about it for years. And about a calm young voice that took control when the sky fell silent. As the sun rose, Phoenix stood alone at the edge of the runway, watching the damaged aircraft being towed away. Another officer approached her. "You did good." She nodded, eyes still on the horizon. "What happens now?" he asked. She adjusted her helmet and allowed herself a small smile. "Now," she said, "I wait for the next silence." High above, the sky looked peaceful again, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. But everyone on Flight 918 would remember the truth.